So good morning, welcome. We're here to take questions or input on our draft body camera policy that should have been emailed to all of you all. Did all of you receive a copy of it? Okay. Um, just lay out a couple of little housekeeping issues first off. Please confine your questions to the draft policy and the overall body camera program. I'm just not willing to take questions on the police chief vacancy, the police chief search. Unfortunately, at this point, we're not taking questions on the selected vendor or the budget right now, and I will explain why. I have a reason. Not taking questions on traffic stops, websites, traffic stop information, controversies, the Huerta case, the protests, any of that. Just please confine our discussion to the draft policy, okay? With respect to the vendors and the budget, we actually have selected a vendor. We're in the middle of negotiating a contract, so I really don't want to speak to that at this point publicly. We're very close to being able to hopefully get into the very next city council agenda cycle, so obviously it'll be public at that point. So I really don't want to touch on that today. So, very briefly, just a little background. The department made a decision to test and evaluate the likelihood of moving towards acquiring wearable body cameras for its officers. This was back last winter. We did a 90-day field trial of 2 models, just sort of get a baseline of what the capabilities were, what we might want to look for in a device. We used 8 officers. We tested 2 models, did a fair amount of work on that. All of that information helped inform our request for proposal that went out in July of this year, I believe it was. We received about 10 or 12 proposals. We narrowed that list down to 3, I believe. We did a little bit more field testing, came to a consensus on what model we wanted to select and which model would be best for our overall video management program. There's considerably more to this than just buying cameras and putting them on officers. So as I sit here today and as promised, as you may recall, we held 6 listening sessions around the city to solicit public input and feedback. We met with the officers and got input and feedback from them as well. As promised, the public was concerned about what the policy would look like, and they wanted some input. So, as promised, the draft policy, this is a draft policy. I can't stress the word draft enough. It is not final. It has been disseminated to you. It's been disseminated to the officers. It is there for you to review. It'll be disseminated. You will help us disseminate it to the public. We will receive public input. Public Affairs has set up an email as well as a phone line to take input. I'm receiving input directly from the officers. So at this point, I will open the floor to you for questions regarding the policy. I think you're first. Forgive me if I don't get names because I'm not really familiar with everyone personally. So continue.
Just a couple of quick questions. It's a draft policy, so how soon do you guys hope to finalize this, and what will be the process of finalizing this?
Very good question. We're taking public input and officer input until January 14th, I believe the date is, at which point we'll collect all the information, evaluate it, see how it fits with or comports with the departmental needs, the program needs, because remember, this is really about the program. It's not about just the body cameras. At which point probably we should probably have a final policy maybe late January. It shouldn't take too long. And that'll be a decision that'll be made by the entire executive staff as a group as to what we think is a balanced approach to managing our program and serving our citizens as well.
So how soon will officers start to work? What is your hope? What's the earliest officers will start to wear these?
A lot of that is dependent upon this contract. We submitted it. They sent it back and wanted to make some changes. We've looked at it. send it back to them to make some changes. They may accept it as is. They may send it back and want to make some more changes. So a lot of that is going to be contingent upon the contract. Then again, it still has to go to council for approval. They may have questions or concerns. We don't know. So a lot of that depends upon where we are in terms of the contract phase. I will tell you, acquiring them is fairly easily. The training piece is going to take a little bit, but not an extensive amount of time, because our IT staff needs to be fully trained on it. They need to be very familiar with it. The video management software, they need to be very comfortable with that, because they're going to be the go-to people for our officers. At which point, we'll also be doing a sort of a train the trainer model or format, so that we can get all of our officers trained. Our intention is at this point is to purchase enough for every officer in the department. That's a little over 500. I cannot say that 500 are going to be deployed immediately. That would be unwise. It'll be sort of a phased deployment, but certainly those units that have the most face time with the public would be the first units to receive one.
You guys provided a list of the people that you would want us to.
Stand by 1 second, because I know he had 3.
Yeah, well, I was for clarification, so could we say like sometime next year, spring, summer, fall, if everything goes according to
I feel pretty comfortable saying certainly by the spring, perhaps sooner.
A list of how many, who you want to start with? And I know you said 500 total, but starting out, roughly how many would you say you guys are anticipating?
Uniform patrol itself is around 250, and then add in the heat officers. I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't have hard numbers for you. Heat officers, our violent incident response team, our warrant squad, traffic services, bike officers. I think our first wave will be that initial 250 of uniform patrol and heat, and then we can phase in the others over the course of the spring and summer.
Another thing, you guys have said in here about secondary employment jobs, they should be worn during secondary employment jobs.
Yes.
Is that like if an officer is hired out to do security somewhere?
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what that means. So if an officer is working off the food line is a good example. They retain our officers to work security there. They're going to be required to have it on while they're working those secondary employment jobs.
What were some of the key things that you heard from the public and also from officers during the initial comment?
Good question. The public was concerned about when it was going to be recorded and when it wouldn't be. The officers had the same concern. A lot of the officers' concern were about mounting it securely to their person. They were really interested in how it's going to function. I want to say another public concern was access to the footage. That came up, and I think I don't know if did we send, Mr. Glenn, did we send them the actual FAQs as well? Okay, so you may recall from the listening session, we collected questions in writing from everyone. We promised that we would respond to every single question. We have responded to every single question. We sort of grouped them in sort of themes so that I don't have to type the same answer multiple times. I just basically say C number whatever. I think that came out to 18 pages?
Yes.
18 pages that'll be going back out to the public. So you'll have access to that as well.
With that about access, it's the same as dash cam, correct? Where it's not.
You're absolutely correct. The body, I can say this, and I kind of want to stress this. The body camera policy is not going to be any more restrictive than the current in-car camera policy. The video footage is not a public record. It's a record of a criminal investigation governed under General Statute 132-1.4. Exact same as the in-car camera footage, exactly the same as an officer's written report. Because in reality, the video footage is just another iteration of what an officer would write in a police report anyway. So the public is not getting, this is not going to be a more restrictive policy, so they should be very comfortable and familiar with that. Can you stand by 1 second? I think Mr. Gentleman here had a question.
I didn't, but I
Oh.
do.
Okay, carry on.
Just like with the concerns nationally that have come from body camera, dash cam video being made accessible thinking specifically of Chicago most recently, is it something that if there was a scenario that it could be released to the public if there was?
That's absolutely correct. We also, and I should have explained this, and I apologize. We also maintain the discretion to release the footage to the public if we sense that there's a compelling public interest, if it's important, if it serves a public need that we need to put this out and share it, then we can always choose or elect to do so. Was that all? Yes, sir.
So how does it work? Does it turn on with the beginning of the shift? Does the officer have to manually turn it on, turn it off?
Very good question. There are a lot of different systems out there. What we have proposed at this juncture is this. The officers will be directed, required, mandated to turn it on upon being dispatched to a call or upon checking en route to assist on a call. We went that route for this reason. A lot of departments allow the officers to turn it on upon arrival. In many instances, you may arrive and there's an incident unfolding in front of you. You've got to jump out and take immediate action. You run the risk of the officer forgetting to turn it on. And we felt like we wanted to try to mitigate that. So there's going to be some travel footage as the officer's driving en route to call, so that's going to be the standard. You're going to turn it on upon being dispatched or upon checking en route to assist.
And then turn it off when the call is?
The way we have it written right now, and let's just go ahead and unpack the whole issue of discretion while we're on it. You'll be able to turn it off once and I have the word in here, but I don't have it memorized, I apologize. Once the situation has stabilized to the point that you no longer need to continue recording. That decision is going to be made by the officer at the moment, and quite frankly, it should be. That's not perfect, I'll tell you up front. And I'll use an example. We have a homicide scene. We often have to secure large areas of space around that. Is the public really served by me having an officer on a static traffic post around this homicide scene, just continually recording while he's sitting in a car looking out the window? That's a lot of unnecessary data being collected. So that's kind of why that discretion piece is in there. The other thing is, there's something to be said for public privacy. A lot of the times when we encounter people, they're at their worst moment in their lives. They may not wish to be recorded, but they still want to talk to an officer. The officer can assess those circumstances while he or she is there in that moment and say, okay, I'll turn it off and we continue our business. But they will also have the discretion to turn it back on when they see fit, if they feel like they need to. I can't remember who was first, so I'll go with you and we'll just move to you next.
You were talking about the amount of data that could be collected. How do you determine how much is saved when it is saved?
The default retention policy we have is 180 days. So if it's not used in court and not used in an administrative investigation, on day 181 or 182, it's automatically purged from the server. The data is going to be uploaded at various points around the city, usually the substation. It'll come to a secure server array that we maintain, we control. We're not using cloud storage. Officers will have the capability, and actually this is a requirement. So at the end of the shift, once you've uploaded all of your video, the officer can go in. That camera is slaved to an individual officer's employee number. He or she will access their video. They will label those videos that need to: break-in, robbery, traffic stop, a citation, DUI, drug arrest, whatever. And in the policy is sort of outlined. Matter of fact, this is identical to our current in-car camera policy. So the retention periods are already set. Now, one of the things we're going to be looking at in this first year is workload and data. How much are we acquiring? A lot of departments around the country, at least in the research that I've done on this, they kind of manage their data storage through their retention policies. I've seen retention policies as little as 15 days if it's not needed. A lot of people are kind of using the 30, 60, 90, in the 30, 60, 90 range. We are a little bit further. We may have to scale that back. We don't know yet. So this first year is really going to tell us a lot about our program. Was that it for you?
I have a couple.
You want to move or you want to do them all?
I'll do one more question if you
Okay.
don't mind. So, you know, in the heat of a moment, an officer's got a lot going on in their mind, they're doing a lot, they're trying to race or whatever. What happens if they don't turn it on?
That's a very, very good question. That's primarily one of the reasons why we said turn it on while you're en route. But let's use another scenario. They're working secondary employment. They're not going to be walking around Food Line with a recorder running for 4 hours. So they're going to need to try to remember to turn it on at that moment. Things unfold very, very quickly for us. There may be, this is not going to be a perfect system. There may be times where an officer forgets to turn on the camera. Now, I will say, we all, ourselves and the public, are going to have to exercise a certain amount of patience because there's going to be a learning curve in terms of developing this new habit of using this new tool. But ultimately, they're going to be held to this policy, and violations of policy lead to disciplinary action. That's the nature of our profession. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said that you guys don't have a specific model or anything like that planned out, but as far as where are you guys looking to have the body cameras placed on the body, on the shoulder, on the chest? Because I know when you bring a gun up, your arms could block that, so I was wondering kind of what you guys were thinking as far as that goes.
That's a good question. When we did the 90-day field trials, that was one of the things we were looking at, and the officers were directed to document placement in their evaluation sheets. So depending on what model you use, I've seen officers in other departments wear them on the lapel on their shoulder. There's a shirt, uniform manufacturer that makes a shirt with a tab already built into the shirt for the purpose of attaching the body camera to the front of the shirt. There are vendors that make a headset that you wear around your head, and it gives you a heads-up view. So a lot of that's going to be contingent upon the final contract. But ideally, and I think I wrote it, if I didn't write it in this policy, it's certainly in the testing policy, place it for optimal usage. So we need for the video footage to be useful and helpful to us. So I can just tell you wearing it on the belt is probably not going to be an option because we don't need ground level footage. So I can safely say it'll be worn somewhere about the officer's person, about the upper torso. Stand by. Was that your last question?
Yes, that was it.
Yes, ma'am.
So when the public, and I'm not sure if this is something that has come out only in the draft, but when the public found out, if you guys did tell them in the meeting that the officers, it would be at the officer's discretion when the camera was on and off, what was the public's response to that if they did find out during the meeting? And then also, you guys mentioned a body camera program manager. Will that be a new hire, or is that someone that's already existing in the police department?
Good question. Let me take those one at a time, okay? And it's been a while since we did those listening sessions. One of the things I didn't do, well, at least I said I wasn't going to do, was take questions at the listening sessions. It was just to receive input. I don't believe we addressed that and had discussion on it. That was the purpose of coming back and saying, okay, we'll put it out as a draft policy. You'll have an opportunity to comment on it. So, we're very interested to see what the public has to say about that very point. Now, I will say, I do recall from the listening sessions, you invariably, just about every session, someone would stand up and say, it should be recording all the time. It should never turn it off. By the end of the discussion, somebody else will stand up and say, use the restroom example. You can't have it recording while somebody goes to the restroom. So once the public discussion starts, those types of things sort of get fleshed out. And so we'll be interested to see what the public response is to that very point. But the reality of it is, it's not practical to just turn it on and let it run for 12 hours. One, the battery won't last that long, actively recording. Two, you're acquiring a lot of footage that you don't necessarily need, that you have to try to retain and manage. Three, police officers, just like every other citizen that we serve, we maintain the same civil rights as everybody else, and we certainly have a right to private conversation just as a normal person. Now, you're going to have to remind me of the second piece of your question.
Will there be a new staff hire for the body camera program manager?
Good question. We do presently, no. That'll reside in with Mr. Browning, my IT manager back here. One of the other thing that we're going to be looking at in this first year is actual workload. We actually have two persons who, within our IT department, who sort of manage our current in-car camera video. They do software repairs, they do video management, they obtain copies for the DA and whenever we need them. So we're going to be looking at workload. We may need to hire a person. I can tell you some other departments have had to hire full-time people just to manage uploading the video to their servers. They had to hire a full-time person just to do nothing but that. Now, what we are doing is, and I'll just share with you, to enhance our overall program, we're looking at a software option that will allow us to more efficiently manage that video electronically, so that in the instance that the assistant district attorney needs a copy of video for a specific case, they'll be able to access the secure server themselves. And that's a staff person, that's staff time I don't have to utilize to assist them with that. We're exploring that option. We're trying to be as efficient and responsible with our fiscal resources as possible. So I can't say yes or no at this point. We'll know after the first year. Yes, ma'am.
I think a lot of people, from what I've heard, is it transparency and protection for all sides wearing a body camera?
There's a lot of different reasons. Certainly there's a feeling, and that's been a part of the larger public discussion, that it contributes to transparency, contributes to legitimacy. Departments that have done some testing, they've said it leads to more civil encounters between officers and the citizens. It certainly helps speed up complaints, the complaint process. So there's training opportunities there. There's evidentiary value. So I wouldn't want to just drive in on that being the only reason. Ultimately, this is just the next evolution in police technology. We started out walking a beat and blowing a whistle to get help. We moved to call boxes. We moved to radio cars. We moved to portable radios. We moved to in-car cameras, dash cams, and now we've moved to wearable body cameras. Technology is advancing really, really fast. I can imagine they're going to get smaller, lighter as time goes on. So this is just the next evolution in police technology. It's just a tool to help us serve our citizens better, and that's the way I like to present it. Ladies first.
Will the public comment that comes all the way until January 14th, will that be public record? Like, will we be able to see what the public is saying about this?
That's a good question. And actually, you hit me with one I hadn't thought of first. So honestly, I don't know that we could withhold it. So I don't have a hard answer for you at this juncture. I will have an answer for you before the end of the day. All right.
How widespread are body cameras at this point in North Carolina? Do most police departments?
Oh, wow. I did a fair amount of reading. Actually, a lot of that is all the work on this topic. And it's all starting to run together because I've read so much. So honestly, I can't tell you how much they have proliferated throughout the state. I know Charlotte is moving towards it. Kinston, North Carolina uses them already. Greensboro uses them. There's a couple of small towns. I want to say Elkin, North Carolina. I've got some information from that chief. So honestly, I don't have hard figures for you. I'm sure it's somewhere in all this documentation. I can try to pull it out and send it to you, but I don't know it right off the top of my
Is
head.
there anything that you've read from the places that are already using them that you will learn from, or how other concerns have been raised where they've been used?
Yes. I will tell you, one of the things I learned was, and I think it's been very helpful to us, was how to move through this process. Some of the lessons learned that I read was, number one, engage your community, engage your staff early on, which we did. I think the listening sessions went very, very well. We did a session on city life that I didn't realize it was going to be replayed down at City Hall every day for a certain period. But you know, people were stopping me in stores and say, "I saw you on TV talking about these body cameras." So engaging our community, that was one of the things that we learned early in the process. I think that was very beneficial and helpful. Engaging the officers early in the process. I went out and met with every patrol squad on the weekend, every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, for a month to try to touch everyone, get their feedback. Do your research, which I think we've been pretty diligent. A lot of departments, they do a year's worth of testing with no announcement. They just quietly do it. Then the next thing you know, you're reading an article, they're getting body cameras. What the article doesn't tell you, that there was a year and a half of work prior to that they just quietly went about their business. I was at a conference down in Florida. It was law enforcement professionals about this very topic. It's about 175, 200 agencies represented there. It's a 3-day conference on this. And one of the things they mentioned was, again, they drove it home over and over and over again. Do your research, do your research. The officers that have to wear it, that's really what matters. Data retention is a huge thing. I can tell you right now, up to this point in the year, our in-car camera video storage is somewhere around 10 terabytes. That's what we've acquired thus far. Now we only acquire that when the emergency lighting comes on. So that's going to emergency calls using your lights and siren. The body camera is going to be turned on every time you're to dispatch to any type of call. So I would anticipate similar numbers, if not greater numbers. Presently, my IT staff assures me we're prepared. I don't want to slip into the mistake that Chesapeake, Virginia made. Chesapeake, Virginia PD is, at least from my reading, one of the early pioneers of body cameras and deploying them in the field. They ran out of storage 6 months into their program. Just didn't anticipate it. So, and that's where this whole retention schedule piece is going to come into play, because that's one of the things we're going to have to evaluate. We may have to look at narrowing that retention period to create space. So I learned a fair amount. A lot of it gets, especially the articles, gets very repetitive, but you can always pull out a little nugget of information. So I can't give you bullet comments of things I got out of it.
What did the officers say they were concerned about having those meetings with them?
Well, we have our front line is fairly young, so this generation, they're very comfortable with technology. There was not a huge backlash about having to wear it. They were just concerned about, what do I need to do to not get in trouble with it? What's the policy going to be? That's what they want to know. There was a lot of similar questions to the public. Who's going to have access to the footage? Who can see it? And again, they're members of the public just like anyone else. So right now, is at least once a week, somebody asks me, Chief, when they coming? When are they coming? When are they coming? Now, I'll share with you some of the reading and conversations I've had with other departments who deployed them. You'll have officers who will, these other chiefs told me, they had officers who embraced it, they had officers who resisted. Once they put it in the field, those officers who were a little resistant switched 180 degrees, said, when can I get mine? So you're not going to have any backlash from Durham PD.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify, you said 500 officers is your ultimate goal?
We actually have 512 sworn. I just use that as a rough figure because obviously I want to have some, because new recruits are going to get them as well. So when they come out of the academy, they're coming out with that piece of technology also. Anything else?
That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you all.